on a chilly Monday morning. I don't know about you, I'm ready for the spring temperatures for sure. I think we've got a ways to go. Thank you so much for being a partner with us. This is one of my favorite things we do at Whitehurst. I have a great partner this year in our Parent Association Parent Education. Madeleine Dunn is chairing that committee for us, and we spent some time at the beginning of the year reaching out to all of you, wanting to know what you want to hear about, and we are so lucky that we have Madeleine as a part of our community, because she's not only an amazing parent and partner in her children's education, but she is also an educational partner to many of our families as well. Madeleine is a local school psychologist and partners with families not only at Bolles but at many other independent schools as well. She works with Dr. Taylor here in town, who is a well-known community member who has served Bolles families for generations. And when we talked about offering different topics, we have an in-house expert in Madeleine. So we are thrilled you're here and that you are sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Madeleine. Okay. If you didn't get handouts, we've got handouts and notepads over by the coffee.
Good morning, everybody. It is really good to be with you this morning. For those of you I don't know yet, my name is Madeleine Dunn. Like Christy said, I'm in a private practice here at Dr. Taylor's office. I've been with him 2 years, and I was also with him in 2015, 2016. Had a hiatus there when my kids were very young. Before I moved to Jacksonville, I was in Baltimore at Mount Washington Pediatric Hospital. I was a staff psychologist there. It's a really neat little hospital jointly owned by Johns Hopkins and the University of Maryland. They have a physical rehab unit for kids recovering from brain injuries and burn injuries, and then they have an outpatient clinic where we did a lot of psychoeducational evaluations and therapy. Before that, I was in my doctoral program at Vanderbilt, and it's a research-based program, so everybody was housed in the lab. And my lab home was the stress and coping lab. So we studied stress and coping in a lot of different situations. One group that we studied a lot were children with cancer and their families, and how the families were coping with the diagnosis and communicating about it with their kids. So this would have been back in 2008, 2009. I was regularly going into hospital rooms where kids were being treated for cancer, and there were no tablets, there were no smartphones. So just 17 years ago, there was a TV on the wall with cable and commercials. And things have changed a lot in a short time. So this is a really nice time to be talking about screen time, because enough time has passed that there is a body of research coming out. There are things that they are starting to know now that we can learn, and that's a great position for us as parents, because we can be informed and intentional consumers of screen time. Like Christy mentioned, I'm also a parent here at Bolles. So I've got a 3rd grader here at Whitehurst. I have a 6th grader at Bartram who came all the way up through Whitehurst, and I have a 4-year-old who's not here yet. So we are going to be talking about screen time today, helping young learners thrive in the digital age. I have about 20 minutes of material to talk through, which should leave us some good time for questions, and then I've brought some of my favorite non-screen resources that you guys can come explore after me. So what I'm going to do is review some of the research that's out there on how screen time affects development, different areas of development in young kids. I'm going to review the AAP guidelines for screen time. That's the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines for how much screen time our kids should be using. I'm going to talk about some alternatives to screen time. Better screen time, if we were going to use it. How do we make changes if we feel like we would like to make changes to how our family uses screen time? And then at the end, I'll go over some of my favorite resources for different areas of development, and that is the handout that you have. So the research I'm going to review today is coming largely from two bodies of work. The Cincinnati Children's Hospital Reading and Literacy Development Center has been doing a lot of work studying early literacy skills, brain development, screen time. It's currently run by John Hutton. And the ABCD study is the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study. That's a large longitudinal study that has looked at all sorts of really interesting things, screen time included. So that's their website, and then I would encourage you, if you're interested, to do your own search, because there is a lot out there, more than I expected to find actually. So you could do the effects of screen time on child development, reading skills, etc. So what the work is finding pretty consistently is that screen time is negatively affecting multiple areas of development. So they're finding effects on language development, auditory processing, which is how the brain understands what the ear hears. So auditory processing is a really important skill for learning to read, learning to decode, learning to encode and spell, and also at a higher level, being able to understand large pieces of verbal information like lessons and lectures. Reading skills, social skills like empathy and facial expression recognition. Visual processing and vision. So visual processing is how the brain understands what the eye sees. It's a really important skill for reading fluency because you have to scan lines of text. It's also important for understanding diagrams and figures and moving from looking at the board down to your paper. Vision appears to be affected. So the eye doctor community is talking about an epidemic of myopia, an epidemic of nearsightedness that they believe is related to screen time use. Executive functions appear to be affected. So these are the management skills of the brain, how we plan, organize, prioritize, keep track of what we're doing, change strategies when we need to. Those are all executive functions. Memory and attention, fine motor skills, and sleep. So the research is careful to say that the brain is very plastic. So when they find these changes in 5-year-olds, for example, it does not mean that they're permanent. The brain responds to lots of things over time, but they are finding changes in brain areas related to these areas of development. So why and how are these areas affected? It really is two buckets of ways. So in one bucket, we've got a lack of things happening when kids are on screens. And then in another bucket, we've got things that the screens appear to actually be doing. So on the lack of side, when a child is using a screen, there is a lack of face-to-face interaction. And this appears to be really important for language development and early literacy skills. There's something important about seeing the face move while you hear the language. You're matching the facial expressions with the meaning of the words, and you're also matching the shape of the mouth with the sound. And all of that input appears to be really important. There's a lack of reciprocity when you're on a screen, so that has to do with social development. However you're responding, the screen is not going to change what it is doing, which is similar for the lack of in-person interaction in that social development. This one is interesting. It's a lack of variability of distance in what you're looking at. So when I'm not on a screen, I am constantly changing the distance of what I'm looking at. I'm playing, I'm looking at my partner, playing, looking out the window. But when I'm on a screen, my eyes are either looking here or there, and that's it. And that appears to be really important in that visual development. And then practice of fine motor skills. So when I'm on a tablet, mostly using my pointer finger, which is very different than using both hands and all my fingers to play with things. On the other side, the things that they feel like screens are actually doing, which may not be good for the brain. Digital sound is different than human sound. Digital images are different than in-person images. And there's an imbalance of visual input over auditory input when you're on a screen. And they're finding that appears to be leading to a premature development of the visual cortex. It's finishing its development too early. And the auditory parts of the brain are not getting a balanced input stimulation. And then the blue light is what can interfere with sleep. So what does the American Academy of Pediatrics recommend as far as screen time use? In children under 2 years, they recommend minimal screen time use. They really say don't do it if you don't have to. From ages 2 to 5 years, they recommend less than an hour a day. And for children ages 6 and over, they recommend a balance where you're prioritizing exercise, outdoor time, playtime, creative time with screens. If you're like me, I saw this and I was like, well, I really want a number for 6 and up. So it's a very practical recommendation. I mean, the AAP works with families every day, so they're recognizing screens are part of life. We need a balance long term. But I looked into it. The number where things start to look not great is 2 hours a day. So more than 2 hours a day of screen time looks like it's much more strongly related to these negative outcomes than less than 2 hours a day. So what are some alternatives to screen time? We can send them outside, and I printed a fun article you're welcome to look at after the health benefits of getting dirty. So there's tons of health benefits to going outside. We have sunlight, vitamin D, fresh air. Dirt itself is very healthy for us. There are microbiomes, I think, that are good for your health, immune system, gut, mental health. It's very interesting stuff. We can have toys available that encourage creative play. Blocks, action figures, dolls, creative art supplies, drawing supplies. We can have board games and card games available. And when we are going to use screen time, or allow screen time, there are some things that are better than others. A community screen on a wall is better than an individual device. They think this has to do with 2 things. So when the screen is on a wall, there's more opportunity for social interaction. You watch with someone in the next room might laugh with you, and it's also better for vision and visual development. When you're on an individual device, you're almost in a bubble. You're not aware of what's going on around you. No one is sharing that experience with you. Lower cut rates are better than higher cut rates, and this has to do with how quickly the picture changes. That's what the cut rate is. So your lower or slower cut rate shows are going to be things like Bluey and Daniel Tiger. Higher cut rate shows, examples are PJ Masks and SpongeBob. And you can actually Google cut rates and find actual numbers of different shows if you're interested. Something educational like Wild Kratts is going to be better than something that's just high stimulation entertainment like a Bakugan show. Something with a story arc like the Lego Ninjago series is a long series with a long story arc as an example. And that's better than your 12-minute individual episodes of Paw Patrol and Super Kitties. If we're thinking about early literacy skills, something with a long arc is going to help a child remember character development, story development, think about what might happen next. It's a little bit of a richer experience. And that's the same for a movie versus 3 shows in a row. If you know you're going to sit down for an hour and a half, a movie is an opportunity to test your attention. Remember a story, think about what might happen next. If someone is watching YouTube videos, something active is better than something passive. So an example of an active YouTube video would be during a drawing activity where the child is drawing along with the video. A passive example would be an unboxing video. So if we feel like we would like to make changes to how our family does screen time, how might we go about that? So I always recommend you incremental, sustainable changes are best. I've got a bunch of resources that you may be interested in. I don't recommend you go home and buy everything. You just end up with stuff that you don't use. If you're a family who uses screens 2 hours a day, I don't recommend you go home and say, no screens during the week. It's going to be really hard to make that kind of a major change. But if you've got a younger sibling who comes to sports practice to watch the older sibling, and they usually bring their tablet, maybe one day a week you pack an activities bag instead. And you just start to build on those changes. Let them be bored. This is a hard one for our generation of parents. We spend more time with our kids than any previous generation, and we like to do that. And I think we also feel like we have to entertain them too. But we really don't have to entertain them. In fact, it's really good for them to be bored. Being bored is one of the mildest ways you can help your child learn to be uncomfortable. And it's so safe. And it's very valuable for them to learn how to be uncomfortable. And then when they are bored, they get creative. They figure out what to do. They ask a sibling or a neighbor to play. They tinker. Maybe they just sit and imagine something. And it becomes a really good skill for them. We can model good practices ourselves with our own screen time, and we can play with them, but we don't have to. So that brings me to my handout of resources to promote development. There's a lot out there. These are just some of my favorites, and I've organized them by area of development. In the literacy column, that first bullet point, Jim Trelease's Read Aloud Handbook, is just a really nice resource for ways to enrich reading aloud. And then that blog post covers it really nicely if you don't want to read the whole handbook. If you're going to watch a story on a screen, it's better to find something where the reader is reading the book. It's basically a video of someone reading a book than an animated version with the voice in the background. For visual and visual spatial processing, I brought this Qubits board game. I just recently learned about it, and it is a really neat game that targets visual spatial development. Y'all are welcome to explore this at the end. The world's greatest search and discover wall posters are really neat. They're huge, and you can post it on your wall, and it comes with 100 different things to find. And so you can leave it up for a few weeks and your kids walk by and try to find them. For fine motor skills, I don't know if I brought them, but ABC Mouse has free cutting worksheets, and kids love to cut, and it's a great fine motor practice. So if you get them some safety scissors and you're generally supervising them, I think this is a great activity for fine motor practice. For social skills and executive function, I love the Peaceable Kingdom board games. They're all cooperative games, so everybody wins together or everybody loses together. And there's a lot of communication and group strategy that has to happen, and they have them at different age levels, so I've brought a couple of those. On-the-go support, if you are going to try to pack that activities bag when you're hanging around activities in the evening, these are some of my favorite go-to resources. I brought the Trace and Write Lakeshore Learning. I just recently got this, and it is really neat. So it's got a storage compartment in the back for letter cards, and it's got uppercase and lowercase letters with how to form them correctly. And your child would put the letter over here and then try to draw it on a magnet board. And who doesn't love a magnet board? So this has gotten more traction at my house than like, let's sit down and practice your letters. I like that one. Group car games. If you're in slow traffic, I Spy is always a fun one. The alphabet game is when you take turns trying to find letters on signs. You go in alphabetical order. So even my youngest can do the alphabet game with a little bit of support. For like, you're on G now. And then you kind of help them. Continue the story is a fun one where you just tell a story one sentence at a time, so nobody knows where it's going, but the next next person needs to continue the story. So that brings us to the end. I'd love to take any questions, if there are any questions or discussion points.
So for like the recommended screen time amounts, is that like, you know, an average over a week or like, you know what I mean? I don't know. Because I feel like the weekends are a little different at my house.
Same at my house. It's probably a lot like most things with the brain, that it really is a daily thing. Like if you're trying to learn something, like math facts, practicing them every day is way more effective than once for 2 hours. So it probably is a daily thing, but I didn't see the research on exactly that.
What about gaming?
Gaming?
We don't do robots, so let kids play Minecraft. Like, are there games that are better for them than others, or?
That's a great question. So I'm not super familiar with video games personally, but if we extract kind of what we talked about, games with a story, like role-playing games, or games that you can play socially, like Mario Kart with your sibling or neighbor, those are probably better than I'm on my iPad just pushing gold coins, probably based on what we've seen. There is a very interesting preliminary finding about speed games like Fruit Ninja, that they might actually boost reading fluency. It's very preliminary, but they might boost the speedy centers of the brain. So if you want to give your child a little time on Fruit Ninja, that's not a terrible thing.
Just a quick note about gaming. It's something that we handle with parents 3rd through 5th grade, particularly 4th and 5th grade, when children have access to games that also have chat rooms. It's actually included in our 4th and 5th grade parent night. Just reminding parents that, you know, unsupervised chat room on any game, any format, is never a good idea. That's the first thing that came to my mind when we mentioned gaming. So, you know, along with just screen time and the digital age that we're in, you can never be too safe, and it's not a matter of not trusting your own child. It's trusting the others who could be in the room, and, you know, it's like once that exposure happens, that's hard to undo. And so I know we have a lot of pre-K and kindergarten families here with us today, but it's not too soon to be thinking about how that will be monitored and what your plan will be for that, because it happens quickly.
We get a lot of tears in my house because we get the robots.
Yeah.
All my friends play, I'm like, I'm sorry. They make different choices in their family. You know,
Yep.
stuff.
When are you seeing phones being introduced to kids?
Too early. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, are you seeing it here in grade school?
We don't allow it here, but what we do have is parents who say, can they have it in their backpack
Right.
and have it turned off because they are going to X activity after school. And, you know, we do allow that. The phone has to be powered down. You know, so there are some circumstances. However, you know, 20 years ago, kids weren't doing that, and they still got to where they needed to be, and mom and dad were still able to get in touch with them. But, you know, it's a safety piece that I think sometimes it seems like it's more for the parent.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, just like everything you navigate as a parent, it is you being the driver of it, and not your child being the driver of it, not your child's friends or other families being the driver of when you decide that. I think the best thing that you can do for yourself is exactly what Madeleine is sharing with us today. Inform yourself and make a plan. And it's not too soon to be thinking about that, and that way you've got all of the information you need as you navigate it.
What discussions, if any, are the school leadership having about banning cell phones, like entirely, or doing like the Yonder pouch where they are zipping them up in the morning? I know a lot of schools are doing this in the Northeast where they have to
Yeah.
zip them up in the morning, because I know on the buses they use it. Like in 6th grade, like a lot of the buses, I've heard this from multiple parents, that the buses, all the kids are on their phones. And even on the campus, when I drive by, I know that they're not supposed to be on it, but I see multiple high schoolers walking with their phones, not talking with each other. So I'm just really curious, with all the research that unilaterally shows how detrimental phones are, like what is the Bolles leadership talking about is the best things for just banning phones, which I would love if they just banned phones outright.
So last January, there was a communication that went out to families when children go into classrooms in the upper school. There are places for phones to go in. They are actually not supposed to be on their phone, and they do get write-ups by teachers and deans if they do have it out. Same at middle school. I do think that changes once school dismisses. I mean, there's only so much oversight and control you do have. So yes, it is a continuous conversation. They are not completely banned at this point, but there are parameters around it, and that started last January.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, sorry, so what's the rule? They're allowed to have them on campus, but they're not supposed to use them during the school day?
For middle and upper
For
school.
middle and upper school,
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
middle and upper school. And here, it's really, you shouldn't have it, and no smartwatches either.
That was my next question, is
Yeah.
what's the rule about smartwatches for the middle and upper?
And it's, well, my child wants to keep track of time. We have a clock in every classroom. And actually, it's better for them to learn how to read that analog clock than it is the digital. So, yeah, we've heard it all. There's adults, and I'm a parent too, and there's no handbook with these little guys, and you are their protector. And you are the one responsible for paving the way for them and their development. And that's kind of what today is all about. I've been in education for 26 years and an administrator who has been involved with admissions for 16. And I will tell you that the fine and gross motor development and visual motor development that we saw 16 years ago is very different than what we're seeing today. Children who are not able to have enough strength in their hands to hold a pair of scissors to cut. It's something as simple as picking up a pencil and being able to have a 3-fingered grasp on it. Seeing kids who are still fisting because they just haven't had that exposure. So, you're all already kind of beyond that part of it, but when we're looking at 3 and 4-year-olds through the admissions process, as we are trying to determine where they are on that developmental continuum, there's definitely more significant delays today than we would have seen 16 years ago, probably 5 years ago.
I just want to add something to, and I know we make the decisions as parents and everything, but friends definitely. I have an 8th grader, and there is a group that's called Hold Until 8th Grade for cell phones, and we did that with our whole group, and it was easier for parents not to get pressure because they always, so-and-so got it, so-and-so. But we are in a group, and so is also doing it. So we hold it together, and almost all of us stay together, holding hands. Believe me, the pressure is so why not? And it's every single day, and it's like as a parent, right? Some days are a little bit easier than the others, so we hold it together. You sign a contract with them. They also sign a contract until 8th grade. We are gonna hold on to this, and these are the rules that you need to follow when you get a cell phone. And it was amazing. Mothers supporting each other because it really feels lonely, and you feel like you are swimming against the flow because there are so many of them out there. It helped a lot, so I highly recommend finding those 5 or 6 mothers and get connected and say, hey, you know what, we're gonna hold on. You can talk to your friend how lonely it is not to have a cell phone. You can all talk about it and complain about us, but we are not doing it. So it was easier for me to not go along with that. You can look it up. There are so many and they give you a guideline how to talk to them, what to find and what not to do and everything. It was amazing for me.
That's great.
question back?
That's
Just
we're
one
joining
sign
anyway.
it.
We disagreed with
I highly recommend it.
No, I was just gonna ask about, I think we have a really good balance of homework that's screen time and homework that's paper. But I wondered if maybe you could talk a little bit about the screen time, homework, and kind of the benefits of that.
Yeah, so, at every grade level is a little different. I'm going to talk about the classroom perspective first. We do not have a day in any of our classrooms where there is a surface on a child's desk for the entire day. If they do have it out, it is for a 15 to 20 minute period, whether it is doing research for something in our older grades like 3rd, 4th, and 5th, or if it is utilizing a tool for a practice of phonics or math facts within the lower grades. We have a couple of different programs we have subscriptions for that can be utilized as tools at home. But there should never be a time at home on the Whitehurst campus where any child is spending longer than an hour on any type of homework, whether it is paper or a device. I think that we just have to remind ourselves that they are in school for 7 hours, and even though we have PE 5 out of the 7 days and they have recess every day, they still need to have that playtime at home. They need to turn it off for a little bit. To Madeleine's slide that she showed, like, they need to be outside getting their hands dirty, interacting with neighborhood friends. That as you go through the grade levels, if you're ever getting to a point where you're feeling like homework is overload, it should never be the case here. So I want you to reach out to me immediately if that does become the case. Also, if you're feeling like you're seeing too much digital and not a balance of both, we would definitely want to know that too. Our faculty really tries to be intentional about homework being something that is practice for what is learned here. It's not new material being sent home for you to then be the driver of it and have that responsibility on top of you. So communication is key, and if you're, obviously your teacher's door is always open too, but if you ever have concerns around that, please reach out. Great question.
But that's just great for the arsenal, because now I know she's got 20 minutes of screen time at school, and maybe we're doing 20 for homework at home. We kind of met that requirement for the day.
Yes.
Thanks.
Exactly, yes. Other questions?
Just one quick one. Yeah. My daughter's pretty good about, following a good structure and everything, but where I am challenged is encouraging her to be outside more. And I know every kid's motivators are kind of different, but we've tried all kinds of stuff. She's kind of like she's an artsy or whatever. So do you have any resources you would recommend for encouraging that outdoor activity? She's
That's a
9,
great
if that
question.
helps.
She's 9. Maybe you could try as a bridge having her take her art supplies outside, like set up a picnic blanket in the sun, and see if she enjoys crafting or drawing outside. Because yes, some kids are naturally more active than others. Some kids are going to jump on the trampoline for an hour, and some kids are going to do 5 minutes and be like, my stomach hurts. So you just got to find what drives your child and see if you can make it work. At one end of the spectrum, you could just make it happen. Gonna spend 20 minutes outside, do whatever you want, as long as it's safe, and then you can have some gummies or whatever.
One thing I've done is chat with pre-K is we'll be at Sunshine Park.
Oh, all right.
And if you want to come, we're gonna go. So
Yeah.
then,
Tag team it.
yeah, so there's some different art studios that, my wife's taking her daughter to that if you're gonna go to, maybe you can open it up to her friends
Yeah.
and stuff, so.
That's a good idea. All right.
Or even just going to the beach, it doesn't have to be like, something crazy, and that's kind of relaxing.
Yeah.
Kids love a good chart too, so if you want to build a chart for them to maybe fill up the column in spending outside time. I know we have families too who have plotted a map on how many different trails we can hike in a certain amount of time. So, I think you can get creative with, and sometimes you just have to come in the back door a little
So instead of
bit.
maybe a maximum screen time, I'm minimum outdoor time.
Exactly, yes, yeah.
And especially you got the national forest, like, a half an hour away from here.
Right. I mean, yeah, I'd be there all day.
For sure.
That's probably half the problem, is I like it so much.
Yeah.
One more to layer on what my friend did was, she gave her girls like scissors and a hot glue gun for outside, and they create all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think once too, you just have a little fun outside, even if it is artsy, that doesn't matter. Then you
Right.
just start doing it more.
And
I went to her house and saw the hot glue gun plugged in outside. I was like, this is genius.
Yeah, no, I like that.
They created all kinds of little things.
Yeah. Leaves and sticks. Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cutting practice, I used to let my son cut the grass with scissors. Or the monkey grass.
Yeah.
Did you send him out with a tape measure too?
You know what though, I will do that next time.
HOAs.
But I didn't have to clean up I didn't have to clean it up.
Yeah.
And he thought it was awesome to cut something that wasn't paper.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Talk about like the
Yeah.
time of day,
Sit
or,
outside.
like how many hours before bedtime.
Yes. So it's very documented that 30 minutes before bedtime, screens should be off. So the blue light within 30 minutes of trying to fall asleep is going to interfere, for sure.
When you're saying the screen time, I mean, is that also TV or is that a different light structure?
Yeah, so kind of surprising to me, some of this I learned while I was writing the presentation, it's any screen. Any screen.
So gaming is a challenge as being a mom of a 5th grade boy, because even when you've got neighbors in your neighborhood, everyone has different schedules, and this year that's become more of a social outlet, and why I've caved, because he's like, that's the only time I really get to spend time with this person. I never see them during the day. But I can see it getting so addictive so quickly, and it really, he feels like it's a detriment to him because he knows that all the other kids are spending time on there, and he's not. And just to let all the parents know, we always have everything on speaker so I can hear all the background stuff. So like when you're yelling at your kid, or like, it's so funny because all of that goes through. It's really interesting. But how to rein it in, because he really feels like, well, I'm so missing out, and I'd rather him miss out on all of it, but then he feels left out because the kids are talking about it later on.
So by 5th grade, he's further away from these riskiest developmental windows. And he's moving more into that adolescent window, so you may want to check out the abcd.org website. This study with the adolescents talked a lot about keeping it out of bedrooms and out of meal times, and how that seemed to be strongly related to better outcomes. So just setting some really nice boundaries around that. And finding some kind of balance that works for him and doesn't make him feel like he's jailed up, but also feels good to you that we're staying around the 2-hour mark, if not well under, because even for adolescents, that's when we start to see a lot more of those social emotional effects. And it's interesting because that's a social outlet. At the same time, the research just keeps pumping out.
Well, all of the
social
images that
emotional
are changing and how
development.
fast it is, for sure.
It's not good when they're on screens, even when they're social screens. So some kind of balance, I think, is.
And I'm glad that we didn't talk about it, but social media is a really big thing when they get into middle school and high school, and we were a family that fought it, and that was a very hard battle. But what's interesting, now that they're in college, they don't care about it. They're still not enjoying it. So.
As kind of an experiment, a thought experiment, I started trying to find good outcomes. What's good about screen time? And I really couldn't find any studies showing us good correlates of screen time. There was a study that said watching an educational show with your child can be good, but it's not better than reading them a book. Oh, okay. And I think the same is true for social media. I've heard a talk about someone talking about his belief in the positive sides of social media for adolescents, but there is no research that I'm aware of that is documenting any positive effects of social media.
Do you have any tips on communicating boundaries and limits to other caregivers, particularly grandparents? Yeah.
Grandparents are a tricky one. Free childcare is very valuable.
Ours lives with us. We're multi-generational,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's hard.
So, yeah, my free childcare sometimes comes with like a large dose of Paw Patrol and jelly beans.
Yeah.
Just do what you can.
I think something we can think about as parents, I'm sure that as you go out to restaurants or if you are visiting a museum, when you look around, I mean, I really can't think of a time that I've gone into a restaurant where I have not seen an entire family or an entire group of people on a phone. My daughter and I went out Christmas Eve, and there was a table next to us and 4 individuals literally on their phone the entire time. So just thinking about what you're modeling for your child too. I'm not saying that any of you do that, but you know, it is easy to sit down and say, hey, I'm going to check this, but you know, maybe just making kind of that general rule at your household of we are not going to have any devices at the dinner table. Or if we do have a treat and go out to a restaurant, we're not pulling our phones out. We're going to have conversations, you know, be able to interact with each other, and you know, so those are the kinds of like boundaries and parameters you can be planning for and thinking about, and what works for you. And I love Tuba's suggestion about, you know, getting your group of people and banding together. The tricky part about banding together is your child's friends in 5th grade are going to be different than your child's friends in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. That will change. And while they might have a core, you know, 1 or 2, there is definitely an evolution that happens of friendships, particularly in a school like Bolles, where some kids are together from pre-K all the way up. You know, friends kind of come and go. They're changing as individuals, and so their friendships are too. So that's why it's important for you to think about what's good and right for your family, not necessarily basing that on what others might be doing or not doing. Madeleine, thank you so much for gathering your research.
Feel free to look at this stuff.
And thank you to all of you for taking time on this Monday to join us, okay?